Splendid. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy to have all of you on this beautiful Sunday. It is a beautiful day to discuss a very important subject that we're so happy to announce to all of us in the community. We have a subject that a lot of us are just now learning about because it's so new. And because of this, we're so excited to share it with all of you. It is about the Corinne True Center and the importance of studying Baha'i history. We're going to learn a little bit more about that, but first, let's introduce our speaker for today. It is Mr. Robert Stockman. He is returning, and we are so happy to have him once more on clearwaterbaha'is.org. We're so happy to have you. Robert H. Stockman obtained his master's degree and doctorate in religious studies from Harvard University, where he specialized in history of religion in the United States. He is the author of The Baha'i Faith in America, volumes 1 and 2, which cover Baha'i events in the United States from 1892 to 1900 and from 1901 to 1912, respectively. Thornton Chase, The First American Baha'i, is another book written by him. Abdu'l-Baha in America, a volume that reviews Abdu'l-Baha's 8-month journey across North America. The Baha'i Faith, a guide for the perplexed, which is an introductory text, and part of Bloomsbury's Guide for the Perplexed series, an introductory short work on the Baha'i Faith and nonviolence published by Cambridge. Various articles and book reviews on Baha'i history and theology published in a number of journals, including the Journal of Baha'i Studies Review, World Order, Iranian Studies, Nova Religio, and Religion. Of course, there are a few more places that have been published, a few more places he's edited for as well, quite a few subjects. But just to get to some of the salient points, he was an instructor of religious studies at DePaul University in Chicago between 1990 and 2012. And he currently teaches religious studies at Indiana University, South Bend. Now, Mr. Stockman was director of the Wilmette Institute, the Baha'i Online Educational Agency, between 2000 and 2022. And he currently directs the Corinne True Center for Baha'i History. He has served on the editorial boards of the Baha'i Encyclopedia Project, Journal of Baha'i Studies, and World Order magazine. He lives with his wife and 2 children in South Bend, Indiana. Now, we lead ourselves back to the topic today, the Corinne True Center. In January 2024, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States approved the creation of the Corinne True Center for Baha'i history. The center defines history broadly to include the study of Baha'i history, philosophical and theological studies, the translation and commentary of authoritative texts, and the exploration of the faith's relationship with other religions and scriptures. It seeks to pursue the subject via webinars, non-credit courses, academic and scholarly conferences, a book club, and support for oral history. In addition to this, it seeks to provide the support for rank and file believers, people interested in digging deeper and initiating their own research, and academics seeking to explore the faith via professional standards. It sees the study of Baha'i history as important in its own right, but also important for strengthening Baha'i identity and engagement in public discourse. With that being said, we welcome Mr. Stockman. We're so happy to have you. It's been a bit since we've last seen you, and of course, this is a very truly needed subject to discuss today, because a lot of us are just learning about the Corinne True Center. And of course, it's a very important subject for American Baha'is because it is newly established. We should learn more about it. And hopefully those of us in our community who can contribute may decide that they want to. And because of this meeting, we look forward to allowing others that have yet to learn about this center to also come into contact. Welcome.
Thank you, John. You gave a very long introduction, which included the content of my first 3 or 4 slides. So I think I can probably go a little more quickly, at least at the beginning of my presentation, because I will do commentary on what you mentioned instead of actually having to cover it. Thank you very much. You're very generous in your introduction, so I very much appreciate that.
We're very
Let's see if I can do this simultaneously on both screens. I have to go over here and click over here, I guess, to get it to move. There we go. So you mentioned the purpose of the Corinne True Center, as you said, established in January, so it's quite recent. It's an agency of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States, just like Bosch, Greenacre, and Lou Helen are. And so it's an educational agency, though it operates directly underneath the Secretary of the National Spiritual Assembly. And the mandate that we have, the mission statement that we have, which was approved by the National Assembly, defines Baha'i history very broadly. As you said, it includes the study of the sacred texts, because after all, the sacred texts are revealed in a historical context, and frequently they are in interaction with what was going on at the time. They're usually a response to a letter someone wrote, for example. So many of the tablets actually are responses to very specific situations. Baha'u'llah mentions historical events quite extensively in many of his writings as well. So the relationship between the study of the sacred texts and history, I think, is pretty clear. And they overlap in that sense. Similarly, Baha'i philosophical and theological ideas also have a context to them. That context, first of all, is who asked the question and what were they asking about? What was their concern? And then second of all, of course, when Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha answer questions of philosophical and theological types, they're drawing upon Arabic and Persian vocabulary that in some cases goes all the way back to the Greeks in the original Greek language. Of course, the word in Arabic for philosophy, falsafa, is just simply the Greek word philosophia, changed into Arabic. So you can see how Baha'u'llah is actually frequently using terms that ultimately come from Greek in answering these questions. And I should add, of course, that while we often like to anchor things in the Greeks themselves were building on an intellectual tradition in the Middle East. So they themselves wrote it down pretty much the first time, but we have clear evidence that some of the philosophical and theological ideas that they were refining actually go back even earlier. So that's the philosophical and theological ideas, sacred texts. World religions and scriptures obviously are also a very important aspect of study which relates to history, because progressive revelation itself is an idea that the development of religion is quite historical. It's grounded in what's going on at the time, and of course it also transcends it. So those are the areas that the Corinne True Center is pursuing. You might say that what we're doing is Baha'i religious studies, and in many ways we are covering the sort of ground that you'll see in a religious studies department. The one thing that we're not focusing on particularly right now is social change and the application specifically of Baha'i ideas to social problems, because the Wilmot Institute is focusing on that. And so while they're doing those sides of Baha'i studies, and for that matter, the ABS also particularly focuses on the application of social teachings to current problems in the world and social issues. We're looking at things more from a sort of religious studies point of view. So moving on down here, our approach, as you've mentioned, involves sort of different aspects. First of all, what are we doing in order to study these particular topics? We have online non-credit courses, and these courses are using Moodle, which is an open source software that many people are familiar with. 2 courses, in fact, start on Tuesday and Wednesday. One of them, Jesus and the Gospels in Baha'i and Historical Perspective, which is just about full. I think we had 4 more people register overnight, and we're getting very close to our cap of 40 for that particular course. And that course will look at the Gospels and the historical Jesus from the point of view of modern scholarship, as it's been digging into understanding the Gospels and what they tell us in great detail. And then we also will look at the Baha'i writings about Jesus and the Gospels, and then an attempt to try to decide how we will, I don't know what to call it, balance the spiritual approach that the writings take and the historical approach that the scholars take. It should be quite an interesting class. Our other class that starts next week is Introduction to Baha'i History, which is a graduate level course that's also to be taught at the Graduate Theological Union. And we're hoping that there'll be Graduate Theological Union students taking the course who will then be in that course with the Baha'is. So these online non-credit courses are a very important way for us to make these particular topics available to people and allow them to study them sort of systematically. Of course, many people have already started watching our webinars, which started in January, and we're doing pretty much 2 per month. We did 3 in June, and I think we did 1 in January. So we're balanced out at about 2 per month. We're filled through pretty much the end of February, but we're still looking for presentations, and we'll probably be putting out a call in another month or so to see if we can't fill our program through the summer, at least, of 2025. We like to keep ourselves pretty well planned in advance. So those are the web presentations. We've even done a few interviews with authors and just prominent scholars. We wanted seminars where we would have several papers presented together. We haven't done any of those yet. Online conferences, similarly, we might be able to do those. We'll see. We are going to be working on in-person conferences. We're going to be doing an academic conference at probably, I should say a symposium, probably at Binghamton University in April. So we're working on that. And we've just started publishing research notes, and we may at some point try to start a journal of Baha'i history, though we'll see whether that's practical. So that gives you some idea of what we're trying to do, ways that we will encourage the study of these things. The idea in terms of what the purpose of all of these programs are overall, they're designed to facilitate reflection, consultation, and action, leading to deeper understanding, personal transformation, and collective action for the common good. So we have a kind of, you might say, sort of 3 different levels here of impact on the person. One is just deeper understanding. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Now I know that. Then, of course, if there's a sense that I now have learned something new that's quite interesting for me, it to some extent leads to a personal transformation. Perhaps it leads to greater devotion to the faith, a stronger Baha'i identity. And then ultimately, we hope it leads to action. So these are sort of the 3 different levels of penetration into the person that we think any course on any topic on the faith should accomplish. We particularly want to foster scholarship by younger people and people of color, and we've only begun to start thinking about how we want to do that. And we have 3 different levels of work that we're trying to do. An introductory level that pretty much can reach any adult, a more advanced level where we have, so shall we say, more advanced seminar type courses. The Jesus and the Gospels course and the Introduction to Baha'i History course are both at that level. So they're more difficult. They take really a lot of work. And then, of course, we hope to be able to do things at the graduate and postgraduate level, which would involve very, very sophisticated courses, more demanding reading and writing, and ultimately research about the faith that would lead to academic publication. So those are the kinds of things we want to do. And you can think about this again, kind of like a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you only get a few things which are high quality academic work. But then underneath that, you have to have a large number of things going on down at the bottom, at the base, where large numbers of people are studying and are learning and are advancing in their understanding. As you go up, you have fewer and fewer people who are able to get, up to that highest level, but you will never find those people if you don't encourage things starting at the bottom. Also, the people at the bottom have to gradually understand the kind of scholarship you're talking about. So the people on top's ideas will say, oh, well, why are they talking about that kind of stuff? We need to help develop a culture in the community which understands the importance of study and the importance of, in many cases, very sophisticated thinking about the teachings. And that's something that we have not really quite accomplished, I think, yet. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to do. Quick shout out to the executive committee, in case you're curious. Bill Collins is in Washington, D.C., retired and has completed 2 master's degrees and is working on a book. Gwen Etter Lewis is a retired professor of African American studies and linguistics in Ohio. Omid Ghaem, many of you know him. He's in Middle Eastern Studies at Binghamton University. Nima Rafi'i is a student, completed a master's degree at the University of Chicago. Myself, of course, as director, and Mina Yazdani, who's a professor in Eastern Kentucky University in Middle Eastern Studies. And so we meet about once every 5 weeks to keep things going, make things. Tiny print here, sorry, but I can summarize these guiding principles so that you can get some sense of sort of our approach to the Baha'i faith and the emphases that we put on things. This first one, the Baha'i faith's authoritative texts, the revelations of Baha'u'llah and his predecessor, the Bab, the divinely inspired interpretations of his son Abdu'l-Baha and the guardian of the Baha'i faith, Shoghi Effendi, and the divinely guided messages of the Universal House of Justice, collectively form a unified and complementary whole. Study of them should be an ongoing focus of daily life and the subject of continuous and increasingly sophisticated investigation by everyone. In other words, even non-Baha'is should be studying the authoritative texts of the faith and thinking about what these texts mean, how they apply to their life, how they apply to social problems, and sort of, what they mean for all of us. So that's our first guiding principle. Second of all, Baha'i history is an important context for understanding the Baha'i authoritative texts and must be studied on its own right. In other words, we can't go into studying Baha'i history and say, okay, I just want to create a course that will just sort of inspire people to act. We need to remember that what will inspire one person to act may not inspire another person to act. We need to create courses that are comprehensive and kind of three-dimensional, stereoscopic in the way they view Baha'i history. And we are very careful not to ignore or gloss over some aspects of Baha'i history that we feel are confusing or are distasteful. Sometimes we need to include that side of the history as well, covenant breaking being one of the obvious examples. People need to understand what it is so that if people start publishing covenant breaker literature, they have a way of dealing with it. To some extent, you can think of a Baha'i history course as potentially a vaccine against some of the problems that the faith might currently face. And so we have to be very careful when we prepare materials to study Baha'i history, that we don't clean it up, shall we say, too much. One thing we don't want people to think is that the Baha'i community was perfect in the past and it's been going downhill ever since. The fact is that the community has always had its problems. It's always faced the bumps on the road. And we need to make all of that available to people so they can see it and see that we are indeed progressing and not retrogressing. Third of all, exploration of Baha'i history and the authoritative texts is dependent on the first and foremost gift of God to humanity, the gift of understanding. That's a quote, of course, from Baha'u'llah, i.e., that human beings are rational beings. One implication of this teaching of Baha'u'llah is that we all have the gift of understanding, is that all races, ethnic groups, and genders are equally capable of advancement and are equally worthy of respect, inclusion, and participation in building a common understanding of the Baha'i faith and the civilization it seeks to create. So this concept of the gift of understanding of Baha'u'llah's is the root of the understanding of the oneness of humanity, the equality of the races, the equality of the sexes. It's also the teaching that implies all kinds of other ethical things, like the need for everyone to have access to education, and the fact that the natural world is rationally ordered, just like Revelation, and therefore there's harmony of science and religion. This idea of the gift of understanding is very important for understanding all the teachings of the faith. So then moving on to the next point, which I've sort of already elaborated on, both religion and the natural world are rationally ordered, and therefore science and religion are ultimately in harmony. Both can be examined comparatively, critically, and analytically. Both are essential for building an ever-advancing civilization. It's quite interesting how much harmony of science and religion is being emphasized now. If you read Ruhi book 13.1, is that the one on the framework for action, if I remember right? It talks about the harmony of science and religion as being an important aspect of the framework for action. So it's really a very important principle for us to remember when we are putting together a center for the study of the faith. Next, religion exists to connect individuals to their creator, improve their spiritual and ethical life, and to guide human development positively and progressively over time. I've really been doing a lot of thinking lately about this idea that religion has always sought to bring about unity. That has always been the purpose of religion from back to the beginning of time. And I think it's very interesting to try and think about Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and the other religions of the world through the lens of that idea that the purpose of all those religions was to create unity. And it, I think, gives us a very different view, understanding of the history of these faiths when we do that. And then finally, human civilization, through its crises and struggles, is moving toward the creation of ever larger and more sophisticated communities. And today, humanity needs to build a global society based on principles capable of creating a just and prosperous human civilization. So those are the guiding principles of the Corinne True Center. And we think that with those guiding principles, we have a pretty good philosophical basis, shall we say, for our work. We also have been developing learning outcomes, because whenever you create any kind of program of courses nowadays, you're supposed to have learning outcomes. I didn't know that until around 10 years ago, when I first discovered that even courses should have learning outcomes. When I first began to teach in the 1970s, nobody worried about learning outcomes or learning objectives. This is something that's become increasingly important in higher education, well, even in, of course, elementary and high school education for that matter. So we have these learning outcomes for for Corinne True Center courses, and they don't necessarily apply to all the courses. Some courses focus on some of these outcomes more than others. So first of all, to analyze the nature and purpose of authoritative texts and the meaning of Baha'i history, to articulate the nature and purpose of religion, its understanding of physical and spiritual creation, the nature of human beings, both individually and collectively, the role of religion in individual and collective transformation, and its development over time. Really gives you sort of the history of religion side of progressive revelation side, but also physical and spiritual creation, of course, is harmony of science and religion. To examine religious phenomena, scriptural themes, and ethical principles comparatively in the larger context of religion and the ways the phenomena, themes, and principles are expressed in different religious traditions, including the Baha'i faith, comparing Baha'i privilege, Baha'i pilgrimage to Muslim pilgrimage, to Christian pilgrimage, to places of saints, to Buddhist and Hindu pilgrimage. All religions have pilgrimage. All religions have prayer. All religions have some form of ritual action, even though we have very little. And comparison of these phenomena between the different faiths is actually quite a useful way to understand that phenomenon better and understand the Baha'i version of the phenomenon better as well. So those are some of the approaches we want to take. And then finally here, to develop the ability to relate to our creator and creation more deeply, to analyze more critically, participate in discourse more effectively, consult with others more wisely, and seek involvement in the life of society more actively. So I think those are very nicely phrased learning outcomes for our courses. And we'll see how well we can then apply those learning outcomes as we continue to develop our courses. And we hope that everybody who wants to take our courses will think about these as well, of course, and think about how they can use these learning outcomes to shape what they're studying as we go through the content of a particular course. So now we'll look at the different aspects of the Corinne True Center's mission statement: history, theology, scriptural study, comparative religious study, etc. Why study history? I once had a friend of mine say, what is the point of studying history? It's just, dates and events, and, it's a random kind of collection of stuff. Well, of course, that's not really what history is. History is story. And when you're telling a story, you tell stories because they have meaning. They're supposed to convey something to the audience. Otherwise, there's no reason to tell a story. And history really is just a sophisticated form of story. All of the heads of the Baha'i faith have been very concerned about and intimately involved in the collection and recording and making available Baha'i history. We go all the way back to Baha'u'llah, who encouraged Nabil to write the Dawnbreakers. And not only that, Nabil submitted a manuscript to Baha'u'llah, and Baha'u'llah had a bunch of people read it and comment about it. Apparently, the original manuscript got covered with all kinds of people's ink on the margins with comments. And then Baha'u'llah gave it back to Nabil and said, rewrite it. And so apparently Nabil then produced a second draft of the Dawnbreakers. So we can see there was a process that Baha'u'llah oversaw to produce this manuscript. And he even gave specific advice to Nabil: don't include, cut down on those kinds of things. So Baha'u'llah was definitely shaping the content of the early Baha'i history right away and encouraging people to write it down. Of course, the traveler's narrative is Abdul-Baha's account of the history of the Babi period as well. So we don't just have the Dawnbreakers, but we also have Abdul-Baha's short version of it. Then Shoghi Effendi encouraged people to write down their local histories and send them to him, and he used that to create God Passes By in 1944, which covers the first century of Baha'i history. And again, it's a theological history. It tells us the meaning of the events. He was very careful what he included and why he included them. The House of Justice extended that process by commissioning Century of Light to cover the 20th century. It came out in the year 2000. So they've been very concerned about it as well. And then, of course, the 28 November 2023 letter that came out less than a year ago, which was essentially the history of the development of the last 25 years or so, from 1996 to 2021, that 25-year period of time, which has ended, and we're now in the next epoch of the development of the faith, and they wanted an account of that earlier epoch, which of course really began when Century of Light ended. So all of the central figures and Shoghi Effendi and the House of Justice have been very concerned about Baha'i history, have been recording it, have been shaping it, and of course that means we need to continue our own study of it. It's interesting, when you read God Passes By, ask yourself, what's not in God Passes By? Very little about women, very little about minority groups, very little about the development of Baha'i community life, nothing about when feast first began to be taught and offered, nothing about the spread of fasting, nothing about the creation of holy days and when the holy days began to be observed. All of those kinds of historical details, the scholars have had to dig up and fill in since. And so it shows you how, as our interest in Baha'i history changes and as our questions change, new history has to be written. And I'm sure in the 22nd and 23rd century, people have yet new questions to ask about Baha'i history, and they'll be digging into the archival materials and sifting through them and finding new questions to explore and new answers to be able to provide to people. So Baha'i history is very important, and it closely overlaps with Baha'i theology, because the meaning of Baha'i history is derived from the beliefs about the purpose of the faith, the nature of the growth, the challenge faith has faced, the directing power of the principles, and the impact of the principles on people's lives. So very much theology is a driving force there too. You can't read the 28 November 2023 letter without asking yourself the question, what's the House of Justice trying to tell us? What is the meaning of the history that they're giving us? And that, of course, is a theological and ethical question that they've chosen to answer. A little bit more about theology and philosophy. If anybody remembers far enough back into the 70s and 80s, we didn't talk about Baha'i theology. At one point in 1984 or 85, I submitted some sort of manuscript to literature review in the United States National Center. And the review came back saying, don't use the word Baha'i theology. We don't have theology. Well, of course, we do have theology. People like to think of theology as something that theologians do, and it's therefore a bunch of dogma and such. But it just means words about God, and Baha'u'llah has a lot of words about God, as does Abdu'l-Baha and even Shoghi Effendi and the Bab. They define the nature of God, the nature of revelation, the nature of manifestations of God, the relationship of the manifestations to each other. That's theology. And one thing that Baha'is have been doing really marvelously in the last 30 years is creating a kind of systematic theology from all of this mass of explanation and interpretation that you have from the central figures and Shoghi Effendi. There are different ways of taking the different puzzle pieces that they've provided us and putting them together. And that's what really quite a few Baha'is have been doing, and really marvelous results. Philosophy, similarly, is very important. Shoghi Effendi made it very clear that it's a sound branch of learning, and he said, quote, not fruitless excursions into metaphysical hair-splittings that the medieval philosophical branches of study pursued. Things like, well, numerology, for example. We love numerology in the faith, but we don't actually use it to interpret the writings, unless, of course, it's Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha. They will, because they have a divinely inspired mandate to do so. But we can certainly enjoy their interpretations based on numerology, but really can't easily offer very many ourselves because it's just speculation. So philosophy is also important, and the Corinne True Center wants to encourage it as well. Translation and commentary obviously is important. We have more and more commentary being written all the time. According to the archives at the Baha'i World Center, we have about 5 million words by the Bab. I think it's around 2,000 different manuscripts, 2,000 different works. With Baha'u'llah, we have over 6 million words, 2/3 in Arabic, about 1/3 in Persian. And I can't remember the exact number of documents. It's in one of my books. I think it's 15,000 documents by Baha'u'llah. With Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi, in both of them, we have over 5 million words of interpretation and commentary and explanation, including prayers and such, of course. With Abdu'l-Baha, it's like 18,000 works. With Shoghi Effendi, it's like 36,000, something like that. And of course, they're still finding these all the time. And so there's a huge amount of materials, the Bab and Baha'u'llah, to translate into English. And we have about 5% of Baha'u'llah available in English. About half of the writings of Baha'u'llah are now actually available online, because a large portion of them are at the British Museum, and they've been scanned and put up there at the British Museum's website. And so there's a lot of material that, in Arabic and Persian, of course, that one can access there. There's more and more translations coming out all the time, especially provisionals, which are private translations done by Baha'is. We're, of course, free to study them and use them, but we generally probably shouldn't use them in feast because they are not authoritative translations, but they're certainly good for private study and for use in classes and that kind of thing. So this is another thing that we hope to be able to help encourage. The relationship between the Baha'i faith and other religions and scriptures also, obviously, is also an important matter that we want to encourage. The authoritative texts and the ideas that are in the authoritative texts of the Baha'i faith are very closely related to ideas in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Greek philosophy. You have, of course, Judaism and Greek philosophy providing the two intellectual roots on which Christian thought was developed. Islamic thought was built on the three roots: Jewish thought, Christian thought, and Greek philosophy. And of course, the Greeks were translated into Arabic mostly in the 800s, about 200 years after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad, and produced this huge explosion of knowledge, the great scientific and philosophical leaps forward in human knowledge that occurred in the 800s in Baghdad and into the 900s, and a little later until the Mongols wiped out Baghdad and brought a kind of dark age for a while to the Middle East. So there was this huge development of knowledge as a result of the Islamic revelation, bringing together these different strands and having them cross-fertilize with the revelation of Baha'u'llah, a revelation of Muhammad. We have a lot of work that Baha'is have been doing already on how Islamic and Greek and other ideas are used by Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi. And some work has begun now looking at ideas in the authoritative texts as they relate to Hinduism, Buddhism, Chinese religions, and indigenous religious traditions. This is very important work because we may very well find ideas in these other traditions help us understand what Baha'u'llah was talking about, you see. It gives us a different way of looking at the Word of God, a different perspective, a different angle, and it will inevitably enrich our understanding of Baha'u'llah's writings as a result. So we can expect many profound insights over time that will, come to light as a result of that study. And we're always interested in the parallels and the contrasts when you compare religious texts and scriptures. People have noticed places where there are echoes of the Psalms and some of the writings of Baha'u'llah, for example. Places where Baha'u'llah seems to be alluding to texts in the Gospels, ideas that perhaps are mentioned briefly in biblical or Quranic texts that then are elaborated upon and clarified by Baha'u'llah. So there's some really interesting work that can be done to draw out all of that, those connections. So that's a summary of our various mandates, and I'm actually getting fairly close to the end of my presentation now. So all these subjects, Baha'i history, theology, philosophy, translation and commentary of Baha'i scripture, study of other religions and scriptures, are important components of the Corinne Truth Center's mandate. And together, we hope they will help the Baha'i community acquire a deeper understanding of its origins, its development, of its future, and of course, the relationship between its ideas and the ideas in scriptures and teachings of other religious traditions. And that, of course, ultimately strengthens us in our sense of where we are in the world, our Baha'i identities, strengthens us in terms of our ability to participate in discourse with members of other faiths, etc. Participate in interfaith dialogue, for example, is something that all of this will strengthen. So the plans that we have and how are we doing these things? I've already mentioned most of these already. We have our webinars twice a month. We have our non-credit courses, 4 so far in 2024. We may yet actually do a 5th or a 6th I don't know. I see Thelma's there. Thelma, I don't know whether we're going to be doing writing histories and biographies this year or not. We'll see. I'm still can't quite figure out whether the Wilman Institute's going to offer the course or not. If they don't, the Corinne True Center will take it over. So we're still working on the programs for courses in November and December. But we're just starting a book club. We're going to be studying Jennifer Weber's book about Alma Knoblauch as of today for the month of September. And towards the end of September, we hope we'll have a little Zoom presentation with Jennifer and with the book club members only to talk about the book after they have read it. So we hope to do that every month. We hope to Move the World in October or November, and then we'll continue working our way through the possibilities as we go. And that's, I think, one of our best opportunities to help a wide range of Baha'is really dip their toes into Baha'i history and begin to explore its use. We did a panel at the Association for Baha'i Studies this year, and we will propose panels every year to them, where we hope that some very good quality Baha'i historical or perhaps even exegetical and theological materials will be offered to a greater audience. We're planning an academic symposium probably in April at Binghamton University, but we still aren't completely sure about those details. And probably a scholarly conference in the fall of next year. The difference between academic and scholarly being the academic one would be particularly aimed at people who have doctorates or at least master's degrees. And holding at a university means we have to have something that, if university professors, we hope will come and participate and listen. And we want to make sure that we have high quality materials that they will appreciate as well. By scholarly conference, I'm referring to more things that are, people who are just beginning to get into Baha'i scholarship and aren't able yet to perhaps produce a high quality thesis statement and a detailed defense of it. So we hope that more entry-level scholarship would be available at those kinds of conferences. We've just started working on a project to encourage oral history, where we don't have the details of that yet, but we do want to perhaps develop materials to help people collect local oral history. And we want to encourage people to start writing local Baha'i histories and biographies of local Baha'is and biographies of families of Baha'is, for example. We're working on that. And as I mentioned, we are publishing research notes now on our CorinneTrueCenter.org website. So we now have 3 of them. One about the encounter between Ibrahim Corella, who brought the Baha'i faith to the United States, and Mormon missionaries in the about 1903. One about the first Baha'i in St. Louis, and one about what's the other one? About the beginnings of the Baha'i faith in St. Louis, it seems to me. So we have these 3 topics that we've already published about. They're relatively short pieces of work. So that's things we're working on now, and we're hoping, as I said, to start a journal someday if we have the energy. We'll see. What are our needs? 2, obviously, volunteers to help create new programs and spearhead and organize things, and in some cases actually help with some of the paperwork of running aspects of the Corinne True Center. Right now, I am the entire staff. At this point, if I had to, I would show a little scene from Mary Poppins where Dick Van Dyke is a one-man band. You might remember that scene where he's blowing on things and beating on drums and singing at the same time. And that's kind of the story of the Corinne True Center right now, but we hope we'll have be in a position to have more staff in the future. And of course, we need financial support. We have a very limited budget from the National Spiritual Assembly and a small, I won't call it endowment, but we can draw on a prior donation to keep us going. The demand for the fund is enormous right now. And obviously, the more financial support we get, the better. It's not probably difficult to send a check to the National Spiritual Assembly Baha'i Services Fund made out to the Corinne True Center, and I suppose that would get to us. So that's a summary of the Corinne True Center. and I'm now happy to take questions. And I'll, I guess, close my PowerPoint here and see how I can answer people's questions.
So friends, you're free to unmute yourselves. It would be easier if you use the raise your hand button just so that we can get an order of questions. But if not, just go ahead and unmute yourself and speak. Diana, we have you. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Stockman, for this lovely presentation. I have two questions. One, you mentioned that the platform is on Moodle.
Yes.
So, would the iPad be able to do classes on Moodle?
Yes. Yeah, Moodle is a very widely used open source course delivery platform. You don't have to load any software on your computer. It's just, basically it's a website. And it's a website that allows you to post comments and questions to forum. It allows you to click on videos and watch videos. It allows you to take quizzes. In that sense, it's rather like Facebook or any other social media platform. Functions very much like that, but it has some capabilities that they don't have. Like I said, quizzes and various other functions are built into Moodle that aren't built into social media. So you can even use your iPhone. You could even take courses with your iPhone, though I don't know if I would recommend trying to read a lot of stuff that way.
Yes, well, that's good to know, because that was one of the things I wasn't sure of. And the next question is, the Korean Truth Center and the Wilmette Institute, they seem to have, if we're doing a Venn diagram, there's overlap.
Yes.
So what is the difference between the Wilmette Institute and the Korean Truth Center?
There's not particularly much overlap now. The Wilmette Institute, as it's been pursuing accreditation, they're going to be applying for accreditation, I think later in the fall sometime. So pretty soon they'll be applying for accreditation. Now, applying for accreditation means they've had to develop their mission statement. They've had to develop the learning outcomes for their courses. And they, of course, then have to align all their programs to their learning outcomes and to their mission statement. They've developed a mission statement that focuses on two things: social transformation and public discourse. These, of course, are both priorities of the 9-year plan and priorities of the House of Justice. So those are the areas that they wanted to focus on. Now, when you focus on those things, you really can't do very much focusing on history, i.e. history, theology, translation of texts, commentary on texts, and relationships with other religions. So basically, as they have focused on social transformation and public discourse, that's opened up a gap that the Corinne Truth Center is able to fill. And the National Spiritual Assembly, recognizing this, agreed to create the Corinne Truth Center in order to continue support for that aspect of the growth of the faith. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Terry, you have your hand.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. At present, we have, I guess, there's only one Bahai radio station in South Carolina. That's WLGI. What are the chances of there being a Bahai dedicated cable TV or Bahai dedicated internet type of thing? I know we also have, I guess, a Bahai Wikipedia. Are you guys going to be involved in that as far as expanding, Bahai broadcasts, or having our own, I guess, Facebook page and such?
Well, I don't know much about this bigger subject that you're asking about, which is really a very interesting topic. I think probably the way, for example, a Baha'i internet TV would develop would be to start small with a program or two, and then a program weekly and a program daily. And that's kind of how Persian Bahai Radio and TV has developed. We're broadcasting programs in Persian over the internet for the friends in Iran and for the non-Baha'i population of Iran to learn about the faith accurately. And if you look at the annual report of the National Spiritual Assembly, I think you'll see that they're spending, I don't know, $1 million or $2 million a year on Persian radio and TV. So it's quite a large effort. And they're not broadcasting unique programming 24 hours a day either. So any kind of regular broadcasting that you were going to do in English obviously is expensive. Right now we have a lot of things going on, like this Clearwater program weekly. There's another fireside running out of in Ontario somewhere. There's, of course, one in Virginia. There was one in London for a while. There's occasionally one out of
going on. It's still going on in London.
Yeah. So there's really quite a lot of these video deepenings and Baha'i programs going on. I guess you could say they're amateur operations because they're not expending huge amounts of money. That would be also true of the Corinne True Center's webinars. We don't edit webinars at all. We just slap up a little bit of music at the beginning and end as we start broadcasting. We do it all live. So there's a lot of this stuff going on, and the National Spiritual Assembly, I know, has been very interested in the idea of more systematic education using the internet, but I don't know what their thinking is currently about it.
Okay. There was something else I wanted to ask, and it just slipped my mind. I'll think about it later.
It'll come back.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, could you address the YouTube question, Robert?
What was the YouTube question again?
It was basically does the center focus on the philosophy of history as opposed to studying dates and events, or you?
Well, for history can be studied a lot of different ways. And there's nothing in the Corinne True Center's mandate that says it only has to study one particular aspect of history. So, for example, Mujan Momen recently gave a presentation about the development of the Baha'i faith in the United Kingdom through World War II, I think it was. And he talked about the various periods of the growth of the faith and why it grew at those different times. So that was a very specific kind of sociological approach to history. On the other hand, we're going to have a talk in November about the relationship between the teachings of Baha'u'llah and the Bhagavad Gita, which is a very different kind of sort of comparative religions kind of approach. We've had really quite a wide range of types of historical talks, some of which are more sociologically oriented, some are more in looking at a specific event. And so you can expect, that wide range of things to continue. So I'm not really sure if that answers the question, but I don't know if I understood the question better.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any other questions from inside Zoom? If not, I guess we could probably.
I think I just remembered what I was going to ask.
Okay.
Do you remember the guy that was here last week who has that master's degree in broadcast engineering or something like that? I forget his name, but are you working with that gentleman?
I don't know who he is, so I don't know.
Well, he worked with Valetta's men in developing the Utterance Project. I can't think of his name.
Oh, maybe it was Adib Mumian, probably.
That's him. That's him.
Yeah, Adib translated Mahmud's Diary, Volume 2, the European volume of Mahmud's Diary, into English. It's published through George Ronald, and he gave a webinar for Wilmot Institute back in April or May. And he'll probably do some more webinars, and we're in touch with him. He does a very interesting research, and I'm hoping we can get him to perhaps talk a little bit about translation, because he translates tablets into English as well, very actively. And I'd like to have him and other people who translate talk about how they translate, what they translate, and the results. He's a very, very capable guy, Adib.
He is. We recently had him on. It was wonderful.
Good.
Molly, you had a question, and then Alex has his hand raised.
It's on the chat.
I don't have the chat
Can
open.
you
Oh,
clarify
okay.
the question, Molly?
Yeah. Oh, what will the Clearwater program become? Will it be every week? So I want to know definitely, so I could
So
be here. Yeah.
these are different programs, though. What Robert is working on in the Corinne True Center, they have quarterly programs, or you have also two programs?
Every other week, well, not every other week, but twice a month, we're doing webinars on scholarly topics, Baha'i scholarly topics. We had one last week, and Peter Terry, whom you all know probably, talked about the
Wonderful.
oneness of religion. We have one coming up on the 8th, and also on the 28 plus 14, the 22nd of September by Najati Al-Khan, who's a Turkish-German Baha'i, and he's going to be talking about the Baha'i faith during the Ottoman period in the Ottoman Empire and their relationship with the Ottomans. And then he's also going to give a talk in October about Abdu'l-Baha's tablets written in Turkish. And we've never had any kind of presentation that I'm aware of about what Abdu'l-Baha wrote in Turkish. So I'm excited to see that particular presentation and learn about what Abdu'l-Baha wrote in Turkish. So that's very different than the Clearwater programs, which of course are continuing, and they very gracefully invited me to present today, and I'm very grateful for the chance.
Wonderful.
And I've put the link to the Corinne True Center website in the chat. So you can also click on that and get access to those resources through
Wonderful.
that. Alex?
Yes. Yeah, thank you. I have a question about to what degree is the scholarship forward-looking? We know that, of course, the writings have prophetic aspects, and how does that figure in history and in the center's goals? Thank you.
Well, I think that's a very good question, and I think it's difficult to, for example, mandate all scholarship to be outward focused or forward looking. Sometimes there's a topic that we need to learn about that we may not be quite sure how it relates to an outward focus. If someone wants, for example, to give a presentation about an African American Baha'i who flourished in the 1920s and 30s and made interesting and important contributions to the faith at that time, that's an important thing to prepare to offer to people. And in fact, programs like that help people, especially people of color, develop their Baha'i identity, and it reinforces the reason why they're Baha'is. And I think Baha'i history in general does that for everybody, at least for people who are excited about history. Some people couldn't care less about history. As I told you the story about my friend who just said it's just meaningless dates and events. But for other people, history is very important for continuing to strengthen and develop their Baha'i identity. And that, of course, helps them to decide to go out and do things. It inspires them. So I would say forward-looking, outward-looking are important aspects of it, but we have to be very careful not to say, sorry, we're not going to accept your paper because it's not forward-looking or outward-looking. We can encourage people to try and figure out how they want to develop that aspect if it's relevant to their paper. But you might remember one of the things I said is that history has to be studied for its own sake. And that means we have to be very careful not insisting that history can only be studied with a certain lens. If you insist that history can only be studied through a certain lens, you're only going to see part of history. And it's very important to keep your eyes wide open to see all aspects of history. Does that answer your question, Alex?
Yes, thank you.
Looks like you're in an interesting place.
It's Arctic Norway.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was that far north. Fantastic. Enjoy the sunlight while you've got it.
We're so happy to have you today again with us, Mr. Stockman. We really appreciate all the subject matter that is the Corinne True Center for Baha'i History. We are so happy that we could share something about this with our local community, so they are aware that it's going to be having sessions. They're accepting, of course, contributions, and most importantly, this is something that our community as a whole should be aware of and participating in, so we have a stronger connection with Baha'i history. Of course, we hope and we pray that the efforts will continue year by year as we march along. There's going to be more content, as you heard from members today. They're interested in various means of being contacted. So hopefully these different avenues will, as capacity develops, also develop. So that being said, we thank all of you for joining us and providing such beautiful thoughts and questions. Of course, Mr. Stockman, we thank you for all of your insights and your just exposure to the subject in general. It's something that we all needed. So we thank you for coming today to present on this beautiful center.
Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And God willing, we'll have you on Clearwater Baha'is in addition to this, and sharing once more, maybe an update, if you will, some other beautiful subjects that you've been working on. And again, we thank you once more for coming and returning to Clearwater Baha'is to share with us this beautiful news. All of you who have joined us today, if you found this video something that you want to share, we please request that you do so. We have this on YouTube so that you can share a little bit about the Corinne True Center with your friends. Likewise, we have it on Facebook, on the Baha'i Center of Clearwater Facebook page. So we recommend that if you want to share this, that you save the link, and also press the like button down below, and leave us a comment about your thoughts, and we would love to get back to you. With that being said, we hope all of you have a happy Sunday, and we welcome you again to check us out at clearwaterbaha'is.org. Of course, to learn more about the Baha'i faith, we ask that you go to Baha'i.us. With that being said, have a beautiful Sunday, everyone. Bye-bye.